All right, 12.4 kickoff for plan. We're going to talk through the 4 issues that are there. We've kind of already talked through some of them in previous kickoff calls. There were just, I think we missed them. So if Keeney, you want to open up the issue list WIP limits as a starting point. This has evolved a lot since we first started it, from having a capacity line, which I don't think we can do well yet because of just the way boards and our data works, and defining what capacity is kind of a little bit more complicated. So we started with the simpler approach of adding work in progress limits to issue lists on issue boards. Eventually, when we want to get to having min and max work in progress limits, but right now we're just doing max. So if you want to scroll down a little bit, and you can kind of open up one of those designs. Alexis, do you want to talk through that since you're here and you designed it?
Sure. Just like the interaction of it, or?
Yeah, just describe it. I mean, for all of our people watching this.
Let's do it. Yeah, and I'm gonna update these a tiny bit just with like minor UI changes after I talked with one of our product designers, Jeremy, but the interaction should be the same. Basically, a user, they see this new option in their column, their list, that there's a settings option. When they click on that, it opens up a sidebar. Close enough. It opens up a sidebar, and there's not going to be a whole lot in there at the moment, but the basic idea is that they can then edit this work in progress limit item. They enter a number that will be their max. They'll see that's applied, and then they could edit that again if they need to. And then once it's applied, they see on their column that there is another number next to issue count, indicating that there's a max on their issue. On their column, if they have, let's say here they have 3 issue cards within that column and they've set a max of 2, they'll see an error there. I don't know if it's an error, but they'll see an indicator there. And then once they move an issue card out of that column, they'll see, there's another screen there, but they'll see that they have, this looks so crazy on my screen, sorry y'all. They'll see that they have 2 of 2. So it's under the limit. They no longer see an indicator on that list that they've gone above the agreed upon WIP limit. And yeah, there. And all is good. And then they could go into that sidebar again and edit that. And then in the future, I think that's flexible enough that we could allow them to set min, max, by weight, by issue count, if that's what they want. And I like the sidebar too. I think in other products, I saw a lot of modals pop up when you want to change that limit, which I don't think is the greatest experience because you really don't have the context of everything else going on in the page. So those are the interactions. The design, color-wise may change a little bit. I was thinking about like the focus state of that column. So, but that's all that might change. But yeah, that's the general idea. Does anyone have questions? I know that was kind of a rough ride with the zooming on the design.
Are we going to show any visual indicators when they're at the limit but not over? So like maybe a yellow or a light color, or are we skipping that for this iteration?
I didn't see that in the products I was looking at, that like you're at the limit, because at the limit is you're still under it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
I kind of like this idea of if you have less, if you still have capacity, it would be nice to have an indicator for that as well.
I wonder if that's why. I don't understand totally min use case yet, but maybe is that what the purpose of min is, Gabe, that you're like not using your capacity, almost like you're not using your resources to the full
correct
capacity.
Like you basically have a station that's idling, which means that they're not being utilized, which is if it's running like within a given system, then it's just being wasted output or unutilized output. So I think that's kind of where like you might always want to have two 2 or 3 things in progress, and if not, then it's like a good indicator that your upstream like should push can pull downstream a little bit more. And yeah, I think that's why I've never used it before. I've only always used max, but different teams I suppose use min. So
Keenan, if you want to go back to the issue, there's a little video where it just kind of shows it in action. Again, it's just like a prototype, but you can kind of see it.
I had a question on, so like, let's say, just like the interaction showed, we set it to like 3, the whip limit to 3. And then someone else, like, you can always edit the whip limit, right? There's not constraints around that.
I'm not sure about the permissions. I don't know if we set permissions. Do we, Gabe?
Not yet, I don't think, because it's still early on. Based on feedback, we will. But yes, you theoretically can go edit the whip limit if you want.
Okay.
That watching that kind of the video made me also think that at some point it might make sense to have like a board config button that would just convert everything that is configurable like into that state, so that you could quickly run through and change like the work in progress limits on all of the lists instead of one at a time. But that was just a weird random thought in passing. But I think this looks really good for a first start, and I like the slide out settings stuff too a lot more than the modal. So good job on that.
It's interesting because, I see a lot of people do the configuration setting like on a different page. So like you said, if we could get it within the context of this page, have like a board setting, maybe it's another sidebar, instead of having to go one by one, that might be cool. Like it just opens up an input. I know Jira used to do that when on another page, but Jira just moved to something more like this, which is kind of interesting. Kind of like how Trello is, where you have the little overflow option, you click that, and then you could select the whip limit. So they actually moved more in this direction. So that's something cool. Maybe we could research, like, how are people setting these limits, and like, what is the workflow? Do they go one by one? Do they want to like configure a whole board all at once? And then maybe like we think about where else we want to go with that. Like maybe that's where we decide if you want to do Scrum, if you want to, like what kind of board you want, right? Like a step before this, before you set up your board.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to how they're wanting to use it. Like it often gets controlled, in my experience, by team structure. So if they have a column for code review or QE or something like that, that's usually where I've seen people put work in progress limits, because there's a resource constraint there. But at the same time, like in my to do column, at the beginning of my sprint, it might not make sense to have a limit there, because there's going to be a variable number of tickets in that every time. So yeah, I think keeping it as flexible as possible is great. I think the sidebar is great, kind of echoing the comments from before. So I think a lot of it's just going to come down to watching how people use it and get some feedback, and then a board configuration option might make sense then.
Yeah, that's all awesome feedback. Thanks, Al.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next issue, unless anybody has anything else. So I think we talked about this a little bit in the 12.3 planning, and I don't think it's going to be done, but it does look like Annabelle got the UX work ready to go. So this is more or less to be able to toggle to look at the diffs and issue, merge requests, and epic description changes. So the only thing that's I think different than the design that's up there right now is there's I updated the description, but there's a comment a discussion around changing toggle description to I think compare with previous version, and I put that correct label down I think 2 bullet points below where the screen's cut off. Yeah, so compare with previous version to expand the diff. There's the UX work is done. I think the backend work is underway, but it's not done. So that should be wrapped up in 12.4 and launching with that milestone. But yeah, this will be nice for a lot of people. There's been a lot of conversation back and forth about what pricing tier it should fall in, and is it an artificial constraint, and lots of different things. So it's kind of made us think about our handbook quite a bit and our pricing strategy and policies. But I think it's going to turn out pretty well, and lots of people are going to be happy. Any questions about this? Not, we can move on to the next thing, and Kenny, you can drive.
Alrighty. All right. So this will be Alexis's and I's favorite topic of conversation over the last week. So looking at surfacing weight and progress information inside of the roadmap epic bars. I think, again, I'm coming in. This is my first kickoff meeting. So really coming in and trying to pick up where a lot of the portfolio management stuff was at the right time and try to move things forward that I think we can get through in an iterative process without too many large scale changes. But this one fairly simple, right? It's the idea that if I have a roadmap and I've got a view, it would be super valuable to be able to see progress inside of the roadmap bar itself. I'm getting pinged by Alexis in the meeting. Stand by. Oh, we have a better picture now. Thanks. All right, you guys can see this?
This is like ideation, so don't get like too married to anything. It's just me thinking through it.
Yeah, so, sorry. Let me get that issue opened up again. Yeah, so we're looking at really just how do we display that information in the roadmap bars in a way that isn't too overbearing, doesn't clutter things up, but lets people just have a quick visual reference of, okay, cool. I'm 32% done with the refactor and the front-end discussion components. And it looks like, do you want to walk through this new picture since this is brand new?
Yeah, so this seemed easy, but when I was digging into it, there was a few different ways to do it. You could either add almost like a new column into the left, sort of like we have a column on the left of our roadmaps that has the title and the date. So I was thinking, okay, MVC, like easiest thing might be adding another column there and just showing the progress within that. But many products also do more of a visual option where it just displays on the epic bars themselves. And that was something common I had seen, and Keenan also liked that direction. But the problem with ours was that when we display epics with no start or end date, we just have this really long gradient. So it was hard to demonstrate start and end date, which is displayed through color, and then also displaying like a progress on the epic bars themselves through color. So I did a lot of ideating on this, and then I paired up with one of our visual designers also trying to think through it. And we came to the idea of like an indication. You can see there's like a little bar under epic with no end date. So just having like a small line there, the indication there that there's no end date. And then showing a progress bar instead of using the whole width of the epic bar and like having kind of like in the issue where it shows it's like filled in on the epic bar itself, just having like a progress bar on the epic bar, which kind of decouples the two things as well, because one is time-based and one is progress-based. So it's kind of like a weird cognitive thing trying to tie those two together. And then showing a weight icon to display that that's what the metric you're calculating progress on. So to be continued, but it's something like that. Something like these designs.
Yeah, no, I think that's great progress because, again, you're right. Those are trying to show those two different kind of measurements of time and effort. It's complicated, but I like what we got here. And then so the long-term vision is that, we're going to start with just weight. But we want to get to a point where we also could allow users to maybe toggle looking at issue count versus weight. But for first pass, we're going to start with weight and then get some feedback and go from there. Because again, kind of like the recent topic, it's going to come down to how they're using it and if they're leveraging weights or if they really want to look at issue count numbers. And it's going to come to how they run their team. So we want to support both in the long run. But I think this is a really good step in the right direction for a first pass. Do we have any questions on that one?
I have a kind of
sorry.
Go ahead, Waller.
I was exactly thinking about percentage in the issue count instead of weight because, yeah, I see that many people count the issues that are being delivered instead of just the weight. And the weight actually it's many times just a guess, and it doesn't reflect exactly the work. So it would be good to have as a second iteration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those where, choosing one over the other is probably a little arbitrary, but I think if we look at the idea that for folks who are leveraging weights and they're actually cognitively trying to put something in that's their best guess, it's a better reflection of progress made versus issue count, because I can have 10 issues and 9 of them could be 1-pointers, but one of them might be a 5. And if 5 of those are done, but that 5 issue is sitting in the background, like I'm not 50% done with my Epic. So again, I think that's why we need to put it in the user's hands to be able to choose, but just really wanting to get a version out and iterate on that with some feedback. But you're right. It comes down to how people are running the team. Donald, do you have a question or a comment?
Nah, it wasn't really related. Just that the designs look awesome. I was just realizing that our weight icon looks a little like the lock. I thought it was a bunch of locks there. Like, what does that mean?
It always does. That's kind of the problem. I think I've seen like that somewhere, but that was actually, I was using newer icons. That's what I meant when I was like pairing up with Jeremy a bit. He's been working on icons lately. So in that mock, I used the new one, which maybe that's good feedback for him that it looks even more like a lock now, but we would use our current one.
Okay. Cool. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. All right, to the next one. So the drag and drop issues and epics in the epic tree support ordering between all objects, which of course is a continuation of 9367, which is dragging and dropping issues and epics in the epic tree separately. So my understanding, again, this one has been around longer than me because I haven't been here that long yet, but it looks like we had to split the work out due to some complexity, and we're wanting to kind of circle back just to tie a bow on this and finish it out. I don't think Yarka or Annabelle are on the call, so I don't know if we have all the context necessary, but I think my understanding of this one is to bring it back and actually like finish that work out so that we can support both versions of that drag and drop ordering. If anybody has any additional color they think's worth adding on this one, I'm welcome to have that as part of the discussion, but I also think it's fairly straightforward too. So. Any questions or thoughts there? Okay, those were the two for portfolio management. I don't think we don't have anything for certify at the moment. So Gabe, I'll turn it back over to you.
That's it. Does anybody have any things? I think the other thing to kind of discuss that we didn't really highlight as an issue is that I know in 12.4 we're starting the process of refactoring the sidebar in Epic's issues and merge requests to be consistent and use the same tech stack using Vue and then GraphQL and making it ready to support real-time functionality. And in conjunction, the memory group is working on a WebSocket support. And there's going to be a bunch of work that we do around that. Do you want to talk at all about that, Donald, or are you good to leave it at
that? No, that's pretty good. One thing we do want to keep in mind, though, as we get to the real time is how we're going to handle some of the real time interactions. Like if somebody has the labels drop down open and someone in another browser adds a label, what kind of notification do we show to the user that has the original user? Just start thinking through stuff like that, because yes, real time is great and what we need, but with it comes a whole lot of UX implications that we have to account for.
Correct. I think that we should take those one component at a time. And so, like, I think you have it on here where we have labels. Maybe we kind of break those out into their own, like, have with their own headers, or I guess if there is a start date, participants, due date, maybe we can talk about on each one. But like case in point with the labels thing right now, if a label is selected, it has a check mark next to it in the drop down. Somebody has the drop down open and it gets updated in the background like a new label, then it should theoretically just seamlessly re-render and show the label with the checkbox or the check mark next to it, you know? But yeah, there's a ton of those things that we're gonna have to think through, and let's be like intentional about it.
Brett and I worked through something a few weeks ago with the details task list item in the issue description with a similar kind of issue where the backend was returning the HTML or the markdown that would be rendered, but it wasn't, like you said, it's not being accounted for what I have open or what another user has open. So then you kind of have to do this, like what did they have open, and then match that and kind of work through it. But it was just pasting the HTML or inserting the HTML into the DOM. So if we have it using Vue, there might be some nice stuff we can leverage from there.
Yeah, good to know. I think there's also, just regarding the issue description, slight tangent. There's a open issue to refactor that to something else that will allow us to do things in a little bit more collaborative fashion without having to re-render all of the markdown in HTML every time there's any change, which would be great. So I'm excited to work on that in the near future too.
I had one quick question. Are we refactoring the sidebar just for epics? Are we focused on epics first or issues first, or what's the order here?
Yeah,
I notice these issues are targeting epics.
Yeah, they are, just because on the front end, it's using the most modern. The refactor of the sidebar on everything but epics is a pretty large task. So this is focused on the epic refactor, epic sidebar refactor, but it's really just for the container. Once we get that container done, then we'll be able to start working on the next page sidebar, which is going to be issues. So I think the portfolio management should work on the GraphQL stuff for epic sidebar, but then we can start working on the GraphQL stuff for issue sidebar on the team planning side or on project management side.
Just, yeah, along those same lines, we should theoretically be, like, for example, where it says 4 participants, that should just be one component that just gets different props or a different query to get the data, right? So if we recreate that, we should be able to use that everywhere there's a sidebar that has the participants in it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you scroll up a little bit, these are split up by how many other pages reuse it. The first things we want to tackle are the components that are shared by all the sidebars, which is like the top part, labels, notifications, and so on.
Yeah, but it's going to be a different GraphQL query. In other words, the participants hanging off of the epic is a different query than the participants hanging off of an issue.
Correct. Yes, it is.
So it's not. I'm just saying. I'm not sure it's. Yeah, we need to reuse it. I'm just. There may be a point where it's not reusable, or it needs to be some switch out.
Yeah. Yeah. So that'll happen at the container level. So at the top level, and then it'll just pass down props from that container on the front end to those shared components.
Cool.
Would it be useful, Brett, if me, you, and Donald like had a quick sync at the beginning of next week, just to, like, because this is a lot of moving parts, just to get on the same page and make sure we're not duplicating things, or we kind of understand how everything works? Or do you have a pretty good idea of it at this point?
No, I'm happy. I'm happy to get together. I'm still wrapping my head around everything we need to do on this. So there are quite a few moving parts.
Yeah, I'll get some time on our calendars if that's okay with you, Donald.
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah, because even not related to the sidebar, we're going to have to GraphQLify both the queries and mutations for both issues and epics. So the stuff we're doing on the back end to get the issue APIs over to GraphQL don't really have to be related to the sidebar. It's stuff we need to get done anyway.
That's true. That's true. We need to get all that stuff moved over.
Okay.
I had a question, Donald. When I started working on the WIP limits and the board list, I posted in the GitLab UI channel to see if there was, before I had the context, there was something like that. in GitLab UI, and someone had mentioned that they're building a drawer component, and someone asked if that would suffice. I don't really know what that drawer looks like, but just so kind of like we're on the same page as GitLab UI, we're not going to be using that. We're going to build our own sidebar, correct?
At least initially, we'll just use the one that Epix is using right now. We may want to switch over to whatever. It depends on what the drawer looks like, but we may want to do that eventually.
Totally. Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, I hate to cut us off, but we are over on time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.